good to see you all. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started, even though I'm sure, or I'm hoping more folks will come in, but we have a tight timeline, so we'll just jump in. Hi all, my name is Nicole Montojo. I'm a researcher at the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley. I'm here with my colleague Eli Moore. Eli, you want to say hi? And he's the director of our Community Power and Policy Partnerships program. Sorry, trying to figure this out. No, the computer's not connected. Okay. Let's see if we can find our tech support. Okay, here we go. Sorry. Okay. So this panel is about bridging partnerships across divides between CLTs and developers. And that's something that we at OBI have been exploring through our own partnerships, bridging across the divide of practitioners on the ground, like many of you all, and our place within an academic institution. So OBI, we are a multidisciplinary center for research, community partnerships, and strategy at UC Berkeley. And we come from a lot of different backgrounds: community organizing, policy advocacy, and urban planning. And so we've collaborated with the network for several years and other CLTs as well. And we're committed to advancing the possibilities for community ownership and the work that you all are doing, because we see it as really a deep expression of belonging. And so this is some of the work that we've done together: a report and advocacy tool on CLTs and local agency partnerships, and this recent report about scaling community ownership, which is part of what prompted the topic for this session today. So we invite you to check those out. Today, we're going to hear from 4 incredible practitioners whose work together speaks to the possibilities of bridging, and they'll speak to what their partnerships have looked like in practice. So we'll hear from 2 partnerships, the South Bay CLT and MidPenn, who work together on the Virginian Apartments. And Fideicomiso Comunitario Tierra Libre and Little Tokyo Service Center, who partnered on 700 Simmons. So we will hear from Felix Aoyang, who is the Vice President of Business Development at MidPenn, Josefina Aguilar, who is the Executive Director of South Bay CLT, Vanessa Gonzalez, who is the Co-Director of Fideicomiso, and Caroline Calderon, who's a Program Manager at LTSC. And after we hear from our speakers, we want to do something a little different. We'll have a more active conversation with you all and dive into some specific topics from the in breakout groups before coming together and reporting back out to close us out. So there's a lot to explore in this short time frame. So we really hope this can be the start of a conversation, and really appreciate you all joining us today. So thank you so much to the panelists for joining us. And I will pass it over to Felix. I'll just put this here.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Felix Aoyang. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at MidPenn Housing. Yes. Okay. Okay, thank you. I do want to take a moment to thank Othering and Belonging Institute. And I'm a big fan of John Powell. If you don't know who he is, you need to read both of his books, which is Othering Belonging Without Othering and the Power of Bridging, which I think is entirely relevant to the work that we're doing here in terms of both the tenant organizing and the democratic participation that we're seeking, but also then scaling that to the practitioner side as well, where we're trying to practice working with each other and the collaboration that's necessary to get more work done. So our partnership between MidPenn and South Bay CLT is actually quite simple. And it started when South Bay CLT actually reached out to us, knowing that the city of San Jose has a Measure E funding available for acquisitions in the city, that was about to be released. But one of the conditions of that, using that funds, was to have a development partner with experience on the team. And South Bay CLT is a relatively new organization at the time, and they know that the city is going to require them to have a little bit more experience behind them. MidPenn is a 55-year-old nonprofit organization. We do primarily tax credit affordable housing, that's rentals, but we have a very large portfolio. We have a lot of experience developing and acquiring and rehabbing properties. So we were a good fit from that sense in the partnership. What was clear, I think, from the beginning is that this is not a symmetric partnership where we're equal partners. This is really South Bay CLT wanting to do something on their own, and MidPenn really stepping in as just a technical assistance kind of consultant. So you'll see in our matrix of responsibilities where RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed, that all of the decision making is on the South Bay CLT side, right? And we're here really just to help and be a bridge, if you will, to make that acquisition possible. You'll see amongst kind of some of the points here how we divided it. We're really sharing a lot of our technical knowledge. So we're passing along our diligence checklists, our critical path schedules, kind of our template documents that MidPenn have used for a long time regarding our property management and just kind of things that need to happen. And that's just to help streamline the process for South Bay CLT so that they don't have to kind of reinvent that wheel. And additionally, I think we are also kind of acting as a connector. So we have a lot of vendors that we use, that we trust, closer, okay. We have a lot of vendors that we use, that we trust, that South Bay CLT can then also leverage those relationships and know that they're getting kind of consultant to them, such as their owner's rep, who is going to help them move through the rehab process. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Josefina. Yes.
I hope it's okay if I do this sitting down. I'm recovering from a broken knee and I'm having a bad morning, but thank you, Felix. Felix has been extremely modest in describing what they're doing for us. We're really appreciative as the South Bay Community Land Trust. As he mentioned, we just became a land trust in 2019, and we existed just on paper for a couple of years. There was a board and there was some volunteer people, but there was no real staff. And so it's been a really quick learning curve for us to ramp up and start acquiring our portfolio. So our first acquisition was a 4-unit project. And then the Virginia apartments that we now have partnered on is an 18-unit property that is going to start rehab in December, God willing. So I wanted to concentrate a little bit more on maybe like bringing that lens a little more macro, because there's a lot of strategy behind building relationships, especially with high capacity partners. In our case, we didn't have the in-house capacity with our staff. We have lovely, wonderful people committed, high capacity in different levels, but not in the development field. So we knew that this partnership had to be the right alignment with our organization. So one of the things that I think is really basic to kind of prepare yourselves to create those relationships, to build these partnerships, is know who you are. What is your mission? I mean, we all know the general description of CLTs. We all fit under kind of a general description, but every organization, emerging or experienced, has their own origin story and they have their own mission alignment. So we took a lot of time, and I want to credit my staff for being really artistic because I could have never created this. I'm old school I think, in terms of like charts and they came up with this wonderful illustration that really, I think, speaks more to what CLTs are more about, which is this organic organization, right? We connect with people. That's the fundamental, a goal of our work. We're trying to connect with tenants, with the community, and all with the goal of raising the quality of life of folks who have been marginalized for decades, if not their whole lifetime. So we went kind of back a little bit. Let's step back and talk about who we are as an organization. If we know our origin story, then we can really be grounded in what are the values that keep us on our mission. Then we'll be better equipped to choose the partners who also have those set of values. And those don't really appear on paper. Like the RACI is a great tool to kind of talk about like who's going to do what. But before that happens, we really have to be very cognizant of who the partner is that we're going to be sitting at the table with, because that partnership has to be extremely solid, and it has to have a lot of mutual respect, because who we are standing in front of are the city or the county or the funders, the banks. So we can't look like we're a weak union. So I thought I would spend my time on just giving this kind of exercise, what we did. And if you look at the diagram, basically it's rooted in the land. So you can stay on that slide, okay? We're rooted in the land. So let's remember that the origin of CLT is all about rematriation. It's about giving the land back to the people who work it, who live on it, right? Who it was stolen from. So we grounded ourselves in that. And then, so those roots represent the values and the strengths of our organization. That's where we're rooted. Then the trunk represents ways of participating in these different goals, because we're all CLTs, but we all work in different communities and we all have different goals, because if we're doing our work right, we're engaging with the tenants and they're telling us what the goals
I
need
can
to be.
hear her fine. Yes,
So
I fixed it.
that's, the trunk.
No, this one's working now. It's
Commitment,
working.
having
Yeah,
meaning
I'm hearing it right now.
community to
I can
participate.
hear her fine.
The leaves represent all the skills
Oh,
and the practices. So which gives basically energy and life to the
I'm
tree.
listening to her right now. I can hear perfectly fine.
Yeah, okay.
Is she using the phone? Oh, she's okay.
I think we're gonna
I'll just leave it then.
see it in more detail. But I just feel like that's the first place to ground yourself as a CLT, when you start looking for the folks that align with your mission to build partnerships. Because we all based on trust. And trust takes communication and the human interaction. Wanted to kind of share that, but we'll be around to answer any questions about that related to it. And with that, I'll pass it on.
Vanessa. Good morning. Yeah, I really resonate with everything that you mentioned. So just wanted to say that. So in LA, we have a pretty cool partnership model that emerged during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'll be talking a little bit about that. And in this slide here, I do have to say that our coalition has expanded to 7. Includes Libre, Long Beach CLT, and LA Chinatown CLT. But just for the purpose of like this presentation, like it's very focused on the pilot program. So it includes the CLT organizations that were involved in the pilot program and the CTC partners there. Like again, I think next slide, please. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, so like the pilot program launched during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic as a response to like the ongoing housing crisis that just, became more severe for the marginalized communities that the CLTs serve. And it became a 14 million investment that allowed the CLTs in partnership with CDC-Developers to acquire 8 buildings, providing stability to 243 households. And just like wanted to like also like mention that like this was really innovative because the county really allowed the CLTs, the CDCs, and consultants, everyone involved to like really design like this pilot program. And there is an independent report that I encourage you all to take a look at, which is goes more in detail of like the partnership and the pilot program. Okay, so yeah, so these are the 8 properties. We have Simmons, which is a property that I will be talking more about since that's the property that in partnership with our partner developer, Little Tokyo Service Center, we acquired. But yeah, just like wanted to like have a visual here. These are the 8 properties, 43 households. Okay. So in regards to 700 Simmons, last year in the CLT, California CLT Network Conference, we had a bus tour and we, in partnership with LTSC, we led this bus tour and we had like numerous stops, which includes the 700 Simmons. So like for anyone that might have attended that bus tour, like maybe like Mariana, it's very familiar to you all because she was our tenant that shared her story with us there. So yeah, so it's 11 units, 36 tenants, and I think what is really important for me to share in the partnership here is that there's like a lot of lessons learned and it wasn't easy. And I'm sure like Caroline has been involved in the project since the beginning. When the property was purchased, I was a board member. So I was like, yeah, like involved, but like more from like not really from a different perspective. But yeah, I just wanted to share that. Yeah, I think I'm really, really proud of like the work that we've done in partnership. It's been difficult. Like we had 11 households. In the process, when I came in as staff member, we were getting ready to relocate the tenants, and that require a lot of trust building with tenants because obviously they're like super concerned about like what does that mean? I'm gonna be living in temporary housing for a few months. I've been here all my life, pretty much. That's what we were hearing. But yeah, so not to like ramble a lot, I do invite you all to read that article and just to summarize, I guess, some lesson learned. I feel like this partnership has been really beneficial to the CLTs involved. Like, I feel like there's been a lot of learning that, oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that we've been able to do with this partnership. So with that, I pass it on to Caroline.
Thank you, Vanessa. Hi, everyone. My name is Caroline. I'm a project manager with the Little Tokyo Service Center. The Little Tokyo Service Center is a community development corporation that partnered with Fideicomiso, the Community Land Trust. So similar to Mid-Penn and South Bay CLT, we had something like a responsibilities chart that you see above. But our responsibilities was solidified through a memorandum of understanding. And so my job as a project manager is to oversee the development or construction of a project from the beginning to the end. And so what is the beginning? There's different phases of development. There's the acquisition phase where, what does your partnership need to do in order to identify and secure the land or property? So here on the chart, you'll see whose primary responsibility it is, who essentially will have to approve, who is going to support, and then who needs to review. And so it's important that each task has someone who is primarily responsible, but then your other partner will either have to support or approve or review in some form. The other phase in development is what we call pre-development. And so these tasks are largely involved in planning, designing, and the financial structuring before your project can begin. And so a lot of that is hiring an architect, hiring engineers, and then figuring out, your financial stack to make your acquisition and rehab possible. So in the case of 700 Simmons, the Los Angeles County pilot program did pay for all of the acquisition price and some of the rehab costs, but an unexpected cost that we incurred was relocation. So it was our commitment to ensure that no residents were displaced during construction. So we had to temporarily relocate each resident throughout the course of rehab. Because once you open those walls in your building, you're going to find that the previous owners of your building didn't do anything to maintain the building. And I think that's a common narrative among the different communities that we work in, that there's just so much deferred maintenance. And so you have to prepare for a cost like relocation. And so we found a loan through the Nonprofit Finance Fund. It was a 0% interest loan for 3 years that we modeled it so that our operations and another grant from Wells Fargo could support the repayment of that loan. The third kind of phase of development is your permitting. So even before you start the work of construction, you have to make sure that depending on the scope of work, that you have all of the permits you need in order to proceed with construction. And then the next phase would be bidding. You can go to the next slide, but bidding means you need to select a general contractor. So in the case of the pilot program in Los Angeles, if you were using the pilot program funds for the rehab, you have to select a contractor that has experience with prevailing wage. And that is such a huge barrier when using public financing is finding a small contractor who's willing to do all of the paperwork associated with showing evidence that your contractor is paying the correct wage per trade. And then lastly is second to last is the rehab construction phase. And so working with a general contractor and selecting a contractor who will do all this work. Next slide. So from the Community Development Corporation perspective, I just wanted to highlight what did it take to be able to assist and work with Fideicomiso. So Little Tokyo Service Center is a CDC corporation. We have 5 different departments. I work in the Community Development department, particularly in the real estate team. Next slide, please. And so there are in addition to our real estate department, we also had to loop in our asset management and property management, but we also needed, our fiscal team and our fundraising team to also find grants to help supplement to pay for the work that myself as a project manager was doing. And then last slide. Sorry, this is just another slide of the additional consultants beyond my knowledge as a project manager who I had to hire to ensure that we were able to hit each phase of this development process.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. So I just want to share a few key takeaways, knowing that there's so much more that we could talk about and hear about from each of our panelists. So I want to say we need each other in this movement. We need more mission-aligned partners, and that means more possibilities for scaling our impact. And when we think about scaling, that's really about growing the ecosystem and weaving it more tightly together. So there's work that can be done at the individual partnership level between CLTs and larger developers who are working with LIHTC, and there's strong models for that, like the ones we heard about today, and templates. The Land Trust Network's got a toolkit for joint development partnerships that you all should check out. But also, we need to change the system as a whole for these partnerships to be not just more possible, but really generative and transformative and aligned with the principles of democratic resident control and governance. And as we heard from the panelists, there's also the real human side of these partnerships. We have to change our ways of being, the human and cultural side of that, building trust and real solidarity across organizations and sectors. And so in addition to shifting public institutions, we need to think about how we shift the movement ecosystem and create the change that we need. So how do we make that happen? How do we do that together? To quote Josefina, we have to blaze a trail. We need to think about the realm of the impossible, because the system that we have isn't built to support this work that we're trying to do. And so with that in mind, we know there's so much knowledge and expertise in this room. We ourselves don't have all the answers, so we want to take some time to do some radical reimagining together. And so we want to break out into some smaller groups, and we've identified some topics that the panelists have touched on that we've discussed in a lot of our conversations leading up to this, and invite you to select one of these groups. We've got the stations all around the room. So first is collaboration. We need to build the openness and the muscle for development partnerships, both in terms of the technical practice and capacity, and also the shifts in culture and mindset toward that collaboration. So how do we do that? What works and what tools and resources are needed? Felix is gonna facilitate that group. And on community control, we need partnerships and practices and structures that uphold community ownership principles and resident self-determination. So how do we design those partnerships to meaningfully center that? And Josefina will facilitate that group. That's number 2. And then on public funding and infrastructure, of course, we need more funding, and we need different kinds of funding to support this work. So what types of funding and program infrastructure would best serve CLTs and our partners? And that is Vanessa's group. On capacity and crisis, we heard how hard this work can be, and the field, as we all are feeling, is really over capacity as it is, and our communities are facing many external threats and crises. So how do we create a new capacity for partnerships and set them up when these political openings and crises like the one we're in right now come up? And how do we want to move forward when those moments arise? And that's Caroline's group. And lastly, the broader ecosystem, we want to do some thinking on that. We know that the field lacks spaces and support for this kind of long-term ecosystem building work. So how can we carve out space from the day-to-day operations and development work? So what might those spaces look like? What support can organizations like the Land Trust Network or researchers, advocates, intermediaries provide to support that? And what other organizations and expertise do we need to be bringing in? So I'm going to invite you all to move. There's Post-its on your table and at the stations. To get the conversation started, we want to ask you to partner with someone at your station, talk a bit, write down some of your initial thoughts, and then post them up for everyone else in the group to be able to reflect. And then we'll have a larger conversation at each of the stations. Does that sound good? All right. Thank you, everyone. I know it does. I'm really sorry to interrupt all the conversations, but I want to make sure every group gets to hear from the other groups so we can move back. That would be awesome.
Are you going to present? Are we presenting?
We're recording
All right, what's it?
All right, thank you all. I know that wasn't enough time. All right, I think let's go around this way. I'll pass it to you.
All right, hey everybody. It was a rich conversation. I'm gonna try and represent it with some meaning, and maybe my group can chime in where I miss things. So we were talking about the broader ecosystem and what kind of spaces are needed, what new partners, expertise are needed to build out that broader system. We talked about closing the gap between construction trades and builders who are aligned with the preservation work and having more relationships with construction workers and builders who can collaborate on projects so that you don't have to like develop that relationship when the project comes. And there's an example of the city of Oakland convening minority contractors, networks, and CLTs. We talked about the need for ongoing regional collaboration and strategizing, and not just kind of one-off meeting and skill sharing, but actually strategizing together and working together at the regional level to build out the ecosystem. Talking about needing spaces for relationship to service providers for services that tenants need, and maybe some kind of emergency housing fund that isn't just held by one CLT, but is be able to be accessed by multiple CLTs in the case where tenants need it. And I'm getting the look, so I must be out of time.
Thank you. And so I will say, we are going to take notes on all of this. We'll take photos of all this and share back what we hear, because I know we won't have enough time to debrief. There's sign-up sheets on the table if you want to make sure that you get the memo that we report out for all of this.
So our question was around capacity and crisis. How can we create new capacity for partnerships, and how do we set up these partnerships during periods of political openings and crises? There was a common theme of, during crisis, the importance of building coalition for advocacy and finding the political leaders that are willing to work with you or that you need to organize to help push your needs. And then it was important for different communities to identify policy priorities within your local or regional municipality to ensure that your CLT is successful. There was a question on like, where do the community development corporations come in? And so in one example, there was a community land trust that was actually incubated within a community development corporation. And then it was also shared that even within community development corporations, there is a need for a pipeline of staff with that technical expertise. So training someone from the beginning to having the expertise to be able to work with a CLT. And so in some instances, you could train someone, you know, if they have experience in a low income housing tax credit project. There was also a note on the importance of reflection after crises. So how can we actually learn from what other communities have done? So an example was learning from Oakland and, you know, their CLT work. And then, you know, what do we do now when certain communities are experiencing the loss of federal financing and philanthropy dollars to do CLT work in your region? A lesson learned from crises was the importance of eviction defense and how to be prepared. And then also from that, the importance of building tenant associations and organizing residents is still very much important as a base for CLT work.
Thanks, Caroline.
My group had a rich conversation trying to answer what types of public funding and program infrastructure would best support CLTs and our partners. So we heard from CLTs across California. We heard about the challenges in San Diego. I believe there's only 2 CLTs in San Diego, and just like the need for support. But we also heard from CLTs in the Bay Area, more specifically, heard about like public funds in San Jose. That includes the BAFA, Pilot Acquisition Funds. And we also heard about Oakland Measure K, which was like a 9 million investment. And there's like some challenges there because City of Oakland was just not really understanding like the CLT model and the tenant governance piece to it, from what I understood. And we also expressed challenges in regards to advocating for public funds, such as it is important to maintain relationships with public officials, but you can't just depend on that. So like there needs to be creativity there. So we shared about like FIP, B, and CUD, and then also like the pilot program not being renewed. Yeah, so I think that's about it. Thank you.
Vanessa, okay, run.
So our discussion went all over the place, but I will start with, Josie really sharing how much she appreciated the collaboration with MidPenn, which I think came out in the presentation. And I think a lot of this is about structuring a really good agreement, like the MOU, right? That or I can't remember what it was called, the RACI, what you use, to spell out what the obligations are on both sides, so expectations are clear. That said, partnerships are, appropriate for CLTs at different stages of development. it makes sense that emerging CLTs, or if you're doing your first project, you're going to need to partner with an organization because you don't have that capacity. And that was the case for South Bay CLT, and why they decided to have engage in the partnership with MidPenn. One part of the discussion that came up is, what about when you're going past your first acquisition? What about when you're going into your second and third acquisition? What should be the expectation of the partner in terms of, should the partner not only be giving you a fish, but also teaching you how to fish? How are you building that development capacity internal to your organization so that in the future you're able to do potentially future developments? Or is that not a path that your CLT has decided to take, which totally is fine, because there's lots of community land trusts all over the state that don't actually do development, and they've decided to focus on something else. But if you are a CLT that wants to make a conscious decision to bring that development capacity in-house so that you are able not only to do the development, but to assess the developments in the future, you may want to have a partner that's going to be able to build, help you build that capacity. So it doesn't create a relationship of dependency, and ensures that CLTs really do learn from their own developments. Another part of this, I'm trying to think about, right. So yeah, there's a certain amount of risk involved. And this is also, I think, connected to the types of projects that you do, right? The larger the project, the more the risk of a different type of financing that you're not familiar with, also some risk. And maybe in that case, it's going to de-risk, right? To be able to work with that partner, or that partner may be giving you experience that you just don't have. You can't do this type of project without that partner, because like LIHTC, for example, right? You can't do your first project on your own. You have to work with a partner that's already done a LIHTC project. So yeah, this is, I think, the discussion. It's like pros, de-risk, being able to gain that capacity if you're in an early stage that hasn't, where you don't necessarily have the capacity. But otherwise, on the other side, there's also this issue of, are you building the capacity, or are you building a relationship of dependency? And coming to this, the topic, which is community control, how does that all impact community control? Well, it impacts it because we are land trusts that actually work with tenant organizations. We work ourselves to organize tenants, and we're really, that is the model, is we're really rooted in the community. And if we're representing the needs of tenants, not only in the short term, but the long term, sometimes it requires us to have an understanding of the financing. I will give an example. SFCLT owns a building in the Haight District. And at some point, the residents there in the co-op decided, we can't use this financing anymore because it requires us to choose all of our residents through a lottery. And we share kitchens and bathrooms, and we have an idea of how we want to build this community, and that's not going to work for us. So you, the developer, are going to have to go back and find some new financing for us. And we did it, right? If we didn't have the development capacity internally, we would not have been able to do that for that community. So this is just an example of how community control and building the capacity to be able to do your own developments and assess your own developments is critical. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are a collaboration. The first point that came up was the difference in the power relationship between like more traditional developers and CLTs that are emerging CLTs that are oftentimes don't have their own development capacity. What else people talk about? And then, okay, I made a point, I'm gonna make my point again, is that I think it's easy for us to buy into the real estate narratives that we don't have the technical skills when most traditional developers have never done what we do. Factually, they stack LIHTC credits, but that's not what we do. So they can't say they actually know what we do either. And I think I would appreciate, if we're talking about how we improve collaboration, that traditional developers walked into the relationship acknowledging they don't know how to do community control, they don't understand shared equity, and they also don't know how to leverage other finance sources because they don't. And I think there are a lot of ways in which like we replicate the same system of real estate where we feel like as CLTs, oftentimes people of color, that we have to jump through every single hoop. And I fundamentally disagree because I'm like, the work is shared And if you're really mission aligned, you understand that the current real estate industry does not serve low-income communities of color, factually, right? And if that's your target, something has to shift, right? So anyways, that was my comment. And then there was more commentary about how like people I think need support figuring out who to trust. Like in an emerging CLT setting, it's like, how do I know who to trust? Because all these developers walk around saying, I have this experience, I have that experience, but people don't want to get scammed with the little bit of capital that we have. So to me, we have to create a whisper network to be able to talk through like, who can we really trust? Who are the staff member that we can trust? Who will actually secure the mission and the vision? Because the reality is CLTs are about decommodification. That is a political line that I think we have to clarify if we really want to collaborate. Not that we can't be creative in how we practice decommodification, but we have to recognize that most traditional developers have no investment in decommodification. And that is not something you can mission align your way out of. We have to organize them. And that's like, to me, the collaboration should be about organizing. Anyways.
Thanks, James. Thank you for saying that, because I can't say that in that same way effectively. I think so. It comes back to kind of what we started with, which is that ratio or that responsibility matrix. Closer, okay, and that like we like when Mid-Penn and South-Based CLT joined forces. It explicitly acknowledged I've never done CLTs before, right? So that's not my field of expertise. And that in the ratio matrix, it's very clear that we are focused only on the real estate piece of it and how to acquire, how to rehab, how to make the transition happen, or the acquisition happen, sorry. So I just want to pull everything back to a higher level that, in the CLT space, we are looking for democratic governance for our tenants, right? We are looking for people to participate, for people to have agency and to collaborate with each other at the tenant level, right? They have to work with other people, their neighbors, and make something work. And I think we got to take that spirit to this space as well, where we're looking to collaborate with other organizations and other people, funders and developers alike, to create a space where we can all work together, even if there are some disagreements about how we want to do things, and but create enough of a structure that that allows others to help, and then kind of fit into the space and create the future that you want.
Thank you, Felix. All right, thank you everyone so much for joining us. Please, if you want to get the notes from this conversation, please sign up on the sign-up sheets at your tables. We'll report